Today's episode 78, and I think, Destry, you're going to talk about the Eagles, part two.
Part two.
I'm going to talk about this verse in Hebrews that's always sort of extracted, even though it's just a phrase of a much larger sentence about it's appointed a man once to die, and after this, the judgment. So I want to talk about that today.
Sounds good.
Cool.
I couldn't get away from the Eagles this week. I know last week we talked about the Eagles. It was kind of abbreviated. I didn't do a lot of research, but I listened to them all week, and I felt like, I left the episode last week and got in my car and listened to CDs still in the player, and I just wasn't able to. I don't think I've listened to anything else except for the Eagles. The same songs, the same CD. I'm not in my car all the time, so it's not like I'm constantly listening. But I couldn't get past them this week. So what I did was did some extensive research, interviewed people. I went to record stores. I looked at my old documents of all the Eagles whenever I was there for talk. No, I can't go on anymore. It's not. I asked ChatGPT to tell me about the Eagles. Okay. I could continue to lie, but I didn't, or I can't. But I did learn a lot. Mm-hmm. If it's true, this is what ChatGPT
right. That's
out.
always a big caveat with ChatGPT.
Yep, right.
If it's true.
I wanted to put that out there. Now, I will say the real research that I did do, the reading, some of the audio books and things that I've heard in the past, what I've seen is consistent with what I've learned from those resources also. So let me just go over some of them. The Eagles, back in the 70s and all that. First of all, little known fact, they started out as backup band for Linda Ronstadt.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Didn't know that. Did you know that, Chris? I didn't know that either. It makes total sense. Mm-hmm. By the way, I'm going to go ahead and introduce what I'm going to talk about next week will be Linda Ronstadt.
Okay.
My goodness gracious. If you've never listened to her extensively, she is some type of talented.
I like Linda Ronstadt.
Very hard to look at in her younger years, but very talented. Okay, so Glenn
Your
Frey.
sarcasm is super dry.
Thank you. Glenn Frey and Don Henley were the power duo. When you think of Eagles, even if you don't know who they are, if you see the picture of Glenn Frey or Don Henley, you'll know that they were the Eagles. They're just the most recognizable one. Let me see. Hotel California was almost called something else. Mexican reggae. Everybody's heard Hotel California, right? Yeah. Mexican reggae because it's unusual rhythm and Latin feel.
Okay.
Now, I guess if you think about it and you listen to it, I can think I wouldn't come up with in my own head a Latin feel, but they did whenever they were writing it. Oh, let me see. Their greatest hits from 1971 to 75 is one of the biggest selling albums ever still today. From 71 to 75, let's see, 38 million copies. That's a lot of copies. And those are physical albums, not downloads. Okay, the people went to the store, paid money to get a physical album, and then go home with it and play it. That's 38 million copies sold in the U.S. alone. That's why they could spend 2.5 years going around the world selling out stadiums. Mm-hmm. They're extremely, extremely popular.
This says it was going to be called Mexican reggae because of the song's rhythm, which was influenced by Latin and reggae music.
Influenced by Latin and reggae music. There you go. Influenced by.
Yeah.
That tells it. Okay. 24 times in one session, Take It to the Limit, Randy Meisner reportedly sang the high note over and over because whenever they were trying to get that song done right, Take It to the Limit, mm-hmm. him and let's see who else was on. Him and Randy Meisner and Don Henley, I believe, are perfectionists when it comes to music. They just will do things over and over and over again until it sounds perfect. It reminds me, and Chris will be able to relate to this. It reminds me of whenever there's a little kitty cat. Come here, kitty cat. We have 2 cats in the studio, right? Sorry. Sorry.
I was totally lost there.
I know. I'm in my own head. Whenever you're editing a photo, you can really spend hours on a photo.
Right.
When in reality, if you just published it or printed it or did whatever you're going to do with it and put it out to the public or gave it to somebody, they would never know the difference. It's just the creator is the one that wants it to be perfect, because we kind of think that, well, this represents me, I guess, and it needs to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. You just have to get it to a place that's acceptable. Let's see. What's some more things? Joe Walsh was a wild card. Joe Walsh was one of the original 4 Eagles, and he was the guy who would mess up. He would throw TVs out the window, and he'd be the rock and roll guy. He was always drinking and always on, doing whatever and getting all the wild women. And he was the rock and roller. He was actually, if you remember from last week, the rest of the Eagles, whenever they got back together for the first or second, must have been the first time, the rest of the Eagles said, "We'd like to have you back, but you're going to have to be sober." So the whole band was telling him he needed to be sober. So he was the last one who became sober, and probably the one that was the hardest. Now he said, I saw on a documentary, he said, "I haven't drank or smoked since." He said he just stopped.
Okay.
And I've heard people that do that.
Right.
Just whether it's a miraculous intervention or they just stop. I don't know, but he claims.
Force of will.
Yeah, he claims that he hasn't, and he says it wasn't that hard. Now that's amazing to me, but that's what he claims.
It's cold turkey.
Yeah, that's what he said.
I've always wondered if you're addicted to cold turkey.
What do you do?
Yeah,
I know.
How do you?
I don't know. I'm not sure. That's really a
derailed,
poignant question there. Don Felder, Don Felder, Felder, wrote the music for Hotel California on a cassette. Many of our listeners may not even know what a cassette is, but he wrote it, recorded on a cassette.
I like how you think our listeners are really young.
Yeah, they're young and hip. That's what they are. And he sent that
we shoot for that teenage demographic.
Yeah, and he sent that to the rest of the band to check it out. Okay, so the band had real fistfights on stage. I'm going to rewrite that. I've never seen or heard or read of a fistfight actually happening. What I heard, a recording of, who was it? 2 of the Eagles threatened each other. Whenever this is over, I'm going to kill you, is what one of them said to the other one. And the other one said, "I can't wait." And then they went on playing. And after that incident, the band broke up, and I think it was the first time they broke up. Now, that's all that the documentary that I saw on YouTube, not YouTube, it was Netflix. If there was actually a fight, I think they would have said that on this documentary. I'm gonna take that as more gospel than ChatGPT. What are you learning over there?
There's like a YouTube video. I think it was at a concert in 1980. They got into a fight on stage. Felder is like. Yeah, he basically threatened him like 3 more songs, and I'm gonna.
Yeah,
it's
on.
Yeah, it's on.
But whenever the ChatGPT go ahead, he or she go ahead, he says there was a fist fight. I don't call that a fist fight. I call that a threat. And now maybe they fought off stage. I don't know. I don't know, but we can't confirm that. They didn't like each other, and
Right.
that's why they broke up. That's why the Eagles broke up the first time. And my understanding was one of them. My understanding from the video on Netflix is that one of them was more concerned with how much money the others were making instead of what he was making. They were making more than him. And back then, I know, according to the research I did also on Fleetwood Mac, that was prevalent through Fleetwood Mac too, because it had a lot to do with who wrote what song. And that was, back then, the writing was the most money-making thing. You wrote that song, and you got most of the money from that song.
Right.
Now, Fleetwood Mac went through that, and I think back in the '70s, that was a model that a lot of bands used. And then, what was it, Queen or some other bands from Canada, Rush. Rush did this. Rush said, we're not going to go through all that stuff. We all write, maybe Geddy Lee, write more than you do, but in order for us not to have to walk down that line, we're all going to cut it 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who does what, because without one of us, it's not all going to happen.
Yeah.
And Geddy Lee, the main guy, said, we've never had a problem with it.
Yeah.
Never. We never resented each other or did anything like had problems.
Well, that's interesting because, like, in my own business, I sort of operate as a sole proprietor, but I work with and I mentor young engineers, especially the ones who are on their path to licensure, and that's kind of how I've always approached it. Because in other companies, other companies I've worked for, I've always noticed there's always this animosity towards each other because you make more money than I do, but I think I do more work than you do, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I sort of adopted this model, like, if there's three of us working on a project, I know since I'm the senior engineer, I'm probably taking more liability, but you're probably doing more work, because I'm managing the projects, and the engineers under me are probably doing more of the drafting, that kind of stuff,
Right.
Or more of the engineering calculations, and I'm reviewing them and all that stuff. But on the next project, it might be one that is a teaching project, so I'm doing a lot more of the work so that they can learn it and they can do it on the next project. So
It's different work.
Yeah, there's always these things like this project. Person A might be doing more work than persons B and C.
Yeah.
But on the next project, that might be different. And I never liked when I worked at other companies where there was always this argument of, well, I think I deserve more of the thing, of the profit or whatever, because I feel like I did more work and I feel like you did less work. And I never liked that conversation because it always pits coworkers against each other, always trying to diminish the role that the other person played. And I don't like being in that situation.
Yeah, that
and
can
so
derail a lot of things.
I always took the practice, like, if it's three of us, if it's four of us, whatever, however many people are working on this project, we take what that project makes, and we divide it by that number of people, and that's how we split it. And we don't argue about it. And I might make less money per hour on this project because I'm doing more work, but that might balance out next time. As long as we're all making money, we all should be fine.
Yep. Right.
And there's pros and cons to that position as well too.
Sure.
But I think it's interesting how a similar model has kind of evolved in the music industry as well.
I don't know about, of course, I don't know about all the bands, but the bands that I have researched, that has been an issue that they've addressed at one time or another. You know what I mean? So I can't help but think that in the 70s, 60s, whenever like Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles and the Rolling Stones and all them, that had to be addressed at some point or another. It's one thing whenever you're just going from bar to bar, playing for drinks or playing for just time, or the band having to pay the venue to play, which certainly has happened, and is a working model also. Whenever you start making $1 million bucks, then you start thinking, well, how much of Well, I can see how that's a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and how much better it would be to have it already 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, whatever.
Right.
But anyway, makes sense. Haunted Harmony, Witchy Woman, which is an Eagles song, of course, was recorded in what some call a haunted house. Ooh. Oh, yeah, in L.A. The band rented early on. Ghost vibes meet guitar riffs. Okay. Bob Seger.
So you're just scrolling through ChatGPT.
Just scrolling through ChatGPT, Chat Bob. Mentoring Bob Seger, mentored Glenn Fry. Let's see. What's in the name? The band considered at one point being called Teen King and the Emergencies. Now, I'm glad they didn't do that. I like the Eagles better. Okay.
We were originally, one of the potential names for our podcast was Theo Bros.
Theo Bros.
Theology Brothers.
And that was seriously given to us by one of the young pastors.
Right.
He was very serious. You could probably call this Josh Nalucci said no. It wasn't even considered. Theo, no.
Yeah. We're not the right age group to be Theo Bros.
No.
That's like college guys who are into apologetics.
Oh, okay. After the first album went, after the Eagles made some money for the first time, they built their own studio. Now, our podcast it started in the room outside of my office at the church.
Right.
It progressed into my office. Mm-hmm. It moved from we were very happy, by the way.
Yep.
Why? Because we had total control.
Well, and it was just a cool little spot to record an audio podcast.
Yeah.
We had a soundboard and some mics, and that was about it.
That was it.
Yeah.
Very simple. And we got recruited to be a part of the Marcus Point trio of podcasts. And we moved into a nicer studio. It was a studio.
Yeah, it was a very nice studio.
But we didn't have control over that.
Right.
As a matter of fact, we lost control over a lot of things. Many times we'd come in.
Yeah, and so just kind of to clarify, because we don't want to paint the picture of we're at odds with all this stuff.
No, not at all.
There
it's
were
just the evolution.
There were a lot of people who are using this studio for different things, and so we went from a very informal setting in your office where we could record anytime we wanted to now we had to sort of schedule in with my work schedule, your work schedule, the studio's production schedule, and all the other people who were vying for that place. And it just kind of made it inconvenient.
Right.
If my schedule especially has to change a lot of times because sometimes I'll be called into a deposition or I have to travel or something like that, and we can't record on a Thursday. And when we had your office, no big deal.
Let's do Friday
record
morning.
Friday.
Yep.
Or whenever.
And you and I were the only two people involved.
Right. And so that's the inconvenience of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. Better equipment, but the equipment doesn't really matter whenever the equipment's not there. Many times we'd go into the studio and the equipment wouldn't be there because it was being used for something else, which that's fine, but it was just inconvenient.
Right.
Right. So we evolved from there to where we are now.
Right.
Your office, it's all set up. Chris has all set it all up, and the cameras are here. Everything's set. We sit down, and within 5 minutes, because there's another podcast. Maybe there's just one other one being recorded here now, right? I think
not a podcast. So my daughter works for an art studio, and they make instructional videos, and they'll come in from time to time and use the studio. And then Chris and his wife have a YouTube channel. They'll use the studio.
They'll use the studio.
Yeah.
So the only thing that really needs to change.
Was it Pixie Princess YouTube channel? Call out.
Living.
Are we allowed to call
creative?
out?
Living Creative with Pixie Princess.
Right.
We'll put a link in the show notes. Gosh, I can't believe
a lot of people don't know this. Chris is Pixie Princess.
Well,
everyone
J-Dell
thinks it's
Living
J-Dell.
Creative. That's right. If you see him, you'd know if that fits him.
J-Dell is living really creative with Pixie Princess.
She's okay. All right, so
Chris just told me after 3 more songs he's gonna.
okay, let's go. Let's do this. Let's say just a couple more facts, okay? Post 2016, Vince Gill joined the band. Did you know that?
I did not know Vince Gill joined the Eagles.
You did in 2017 for tours.
Okay.
He was.
He didn't join the. He just accompanied. He collaborated with him for a tour.
He played the song. He played Eagles songs. Now he probably came out. It doesn't really go into detail. I'm sure he played some of his own songs,
right?
And then the Eagles. Then he played part of the Eagles whenever they played his songs, their songs. Think about his voice and the Eagles' voice, very high tone. So I imagine that they went.
I'm gonna have to look some of those up.
Yeah.
I love Vince Gill.
So man, I'm telling you, he is not only a great singer, but my goodness, what an artist, what a guitarist. So 2017, it's in 2017. Look up and see what he did there. Notably, songs like "Take It to the Limit" live, he played with them. Okay, so is there anything else that y'all want to know about the Eagles that I know off the top of my head? Well, I'll tell you this, Chris. I don't know where they nest, but I can tell you this. They were hired by a billionaire in 1994 to play in the middle of a jungle. So they did.
All right.
Yes, they did. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. I think that's all the stuff that I had time to extensively research.
Okay.
I only have so much time in my life, you know what I mean? I was talking about we evolved into this studio, right? At the same time, I can't remember if I mentioned this or not. After the first recording, after the first money that the Eagles were making, they built their own studio for the same reason.
Right.
They had more power over it. And whenever bands build their own studio, like Fleetwood Mac did, they're able to rent it out to other people, but they always have priority, right?
Yeah.
They can go in there and stay for weeks. And whenever they're on tour, they can record. They can let other people come in and help record it, and help pay for it. Not that they needed that, but anyway, that's the Eagles.
Very cool.
And they're in their 70s now, and I don't know really recently if they're still playing or not. They broke up twice, got back together, and I think that they still do stuff.
And how old are they now?
In the 70s.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's going to make a fist fight either more entertaining or less entertaining, if you think about it.
A lot slower paced.
Yeah.
You can probably see the punches coming a lot easier.
After 3 more songs, I'm coming for you.
Oh, after my 3 or 4 songs and a nap, you're going to get it. Anyway, that's all I got for the Eagles. We're going to talk about Linda Ronstadt next week. I would like for everybody to do a little bit of research on Linda Ronstadt. Just put Linda Ronstadt in a YouTube search and watch some of her stuff from the 60s and the 70s, and I'll take it from there next week. Sound good?
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. What do you want to talk about today there, Joshy Washy?
Okay, so one of my pet peeves, right? Mm-hmm. You know me, I like researching Bible stuff and, sharing the results of my research. And sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes I'm right. It's just always an interesting conversation to me to talk about this stuff. One of the things that's always been a pet peeve of mine is when a verse is like just taken out and isolated from its context and is used to build all sorts of different beliefs on, right?
Churches are built on this.
Churches are built on this. Doctrines are built on this. And sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. But it's one of the ones that I often find is taken out is in Hebrews. And let me pull this up. This is in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27. And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment. That's the verse.
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh at the Bible verse. But
the way it's usually presented is, and it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment. That's how it's usually presented as a statement. And they take out the word as at the beginning and they put a period at the end of it. This is part of a much larger sentence. It says, and as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment, so Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that took for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. So much larger, and even that, when you take that out of its context, can mean a couple different things. But what I love about Hebrews is how it takes the Old Testament and reveals like what the Old Testament meant in terms of Christ, the Messiah, the one who was going to come and pay the penalty for our sins, and like what a lot of the symbolism of the Old Testament meant, and how it pointed to Christ. And Hebrews 9 is no difference. Let's back up a couple of verses. It says, verse 23, it was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So what in the world is it talking about? So Hebrews lays this groundwork for the concept of Christ, which knowing from the rest of the New Testament, especially John, there's this incarnation, right? The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and Jesus throughout the New Testament claimed over and over again that he was God, both in word and in his actions, and so this is God in the flesh, who's the focus of the entire Bible. It's what the entire message of the Bible concentrates on, is the person, the deity of Christ, and what he did. And so all this stuff in the Old Testament, like for instance, the tabernacle. This was where the presence of God dwelt, and he dwelt among his people, and this was the mechanism for addressing the sin of people, because the presence of God was there, and you could encounter that presence in the context of atonement, and present a people that are marred by sin to God, have that sin addressed, and start over, and have that sin. What's the word? Atoned for is one, but have that sin addressed so that it's no longer laid to that person's account, right? And that's what salvation is we've taken our sin and we've placed it on someone who is taking the punishment for that sin for us. We've laid it to his account.
Right.
And so all those things in the Old Testament were foreshadowings of God doing that. And so like the tabernacle, in order for the tabernacle to be considered a holy place, it had to be cleansed. It had to be purified. And this was done with different rituals like sacrifices and different practices and things like that. And later on, when we get to David's life and Solomon's life, when the tabernacle was done away with and it was replaced with a permanent building, the temple, same thing happened. In order for the completed temple to be considered holy and purified, there are different rituals and sacrifices that took place that made that happen. In order for me as a person, in the Old Testament, if I were to be considered clean, sanctified, have my sins atoned for, all that stuff, there was sacrifices and practices that had to happen in order to make that come to fruition. And so Hebrews is addressing that. It said that the tabernacle and the temple were earthly models of a heavenly, the heavenly dwelling place of God, the temple in heaven. And we even get glimpses of that in places like Ezekiel, Revelation, I think in Isaiah, where we're given a glimpse directly into the throne room of God in heaven. and it's like this is the original. The tabernacle was a model of it. The temple was a model of it. Things like that. And so Hebrews 9, it says in verse 19, when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and of goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book and all the people, saying, "This is the blood of the testament with which God hath enjoined to you." Moreover, he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry, and almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. It was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So in other words, everything in the law that Moses gave us was purified with blood. And these are patterns of what actually exists in heaven. So if these things are purified with the blood of goats and sheep and things like that, in heaven those things have to be purified with the blood of something greater, because actual heaven is greater than a tabernacle. Mm-hmm. Actual heaven has to be purified with something greater than what purifies a tabernacle. And so that's the foundation that's laid here. And it says, "For Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us." So in other words, the tabernacle, the temple, these physical things, they're figures of the true. They're pictures of what is actually in heaven. They're like scaled mock-ups, right? And it says Jesus isn't entering into the scaled mock-ups, the pictures. He's entering into the actual throne room in heaven. And he's doing that specifically to appear in the presence of God for us. And it continues. It says, nor yet that he should offer himself often, as the high priest entereth into the holy place every year with blood of others. For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. So in other words, tabernacle, temple, we have sacrifices that happen over and over and over again. They're pictures of what actually exists in heaven. And so there's nothing magical about the sacrifice of atonement. The two goats, one was sacrificed, one was released, all this stuff. That was a ritual that was done in the tabernacle and in the temple. But that in and of itself, like killing a goat, doesn't make your sin go away. It was what that represented. It represented at some point Christ was going to come and he was going to be that sacrifice, and he was going to take our sin on him. That's what faith was placed in for salvation, even in the Old Testament. The Old Testament, they look forward. New Testament, we look backward, both to what Christ did. And it says, interesting thing about those sacrifices, like the atonement sacrifice, the high priest had to do them once every single year. So had to keep being done over and over and over again, because it was a memorial of something that was going to, it was a memorial in advance of something that was going to happen, right? So every year they do this, and it kept it fresh in their mind that at some point the real sacrifice is going to come, and he's going to do for real what these sacrifices are symbolizing. And so he sort of juxtaposes these two ideas. These goats, these sacrifices, this atonement thing, that it happened over and over and over again. However, the one true sacrifice that doesn't go into this tabernacle or temple here on earth and is offered as a sacrifice or whatever, he is our high priest who sacrifices himself in the true tabernacle, the true temple in heaven. And it's once, because it's the final one, because sin is taken care of all in one fell swoop. It says, Christ is not entered into holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us, nor yet that he should offer himself often as the high priest entereth into the holy place every year with the blood of others. For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment, so Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. So there's where that verse comes in. We're showing how there's a finality to what Christ did on the cross. And that's amazing in a couple different ways, because Christ addressed sin once and for all. And for me personally, that means that when he addresses the sin in my life, he does it once and for all. Like I don't have to spend every night going to bed, praying the sinner's prayer, getting saved again. My salvation is never lost because it was dealt with once.
Amen.
And it was final. That sacrifice doesn't have to repeat itself like it did in the Old Testament. My salvation is secure. My salvation is based on what Christ did, and what Christ did was the final atoning of all the sin. And just like it's appointed unto man once to die, and after this the judgment, Christ offered himself once, and sin is taken care of. And I think that's amazing. That Hebrews addresses it that way. And I think we also lose so much of that by just taking this one verse out, this one phrase out, and saying people die once and then they're judged. Now let's base a bunch of stuff off that.
There's a lot of those sentences in the Bible that we could and we still maybe do sometimes. Take it and we can make a whole book out of it. Make a whole, like you said, make a whole doctrine out of it, or behavior or whatever. And
I find myself still, having to parse those things out. And that's why that was actually one of the inspirations for this podcast, the deep dive, is that we, in Sunday morning services, it's difficult a lot of times to go into the context of all the verses you use as support for your sermon.
It's impossible to do it. There's just not enough.
Right, and it makes it more probable that we come to the wrong conclusion about something, right? It's so the inspiration for this podcast was, well, let's go into all that stuff.
That's right.
And when I'm sitting there in the Sunday morning service and a verse is used, I usually go back and I screenshot the entire chapter at least, put that in, highlight where the verse is, read before it, read after it, see what the context is, and that's kind of how we come up with notes to do this stuff. And
I'll say this: I love our podcast.
I have a lot of fun with it.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. I love the concept of having this as an extension of a service on Sunday.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird like needle to thread, because we want it. If you are there and you listen to the Sunday service, we want you to get something out of it. But if you weren't there, like listeners from other states, whatever, they don't necessarily go to our church, we want it still to be something interesting for you. Like, we don't want you to have been required to be at the Sunday service to understand what's going on here.
Yeah, that's right.
Because Sunday we didn't talk about the Eagles. Right,
we sure didn't. I did, but nobody was listening, so it didn't hold the same amount. Yeah. Hey, I want to do something before we. First of all, thank you. And I want to do something before we leave, if y'all don't mind. Today is a very special day, and I'm going to do something that it could go totally wrong, but we're going to find out.
we can always clip it.
Hey, Destry.
Hey, Donna. How are you?
Good. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary to you. 26 years.
Speaker.
Yes.
26 years. Can you speak a little bit louder, honey?
Yeah, I'm in the office, so I don't want to.
Okay.
Make my voice be heard from other people.
I understand. Okay. Well, I want to tell you that we are live recording our podcast, and I just wanted to. You're on speakerphone. Chris is here, And Josh is here, and we're closing out our podcast by calling you, and I wanted you to know that I love you, I honor you, and I'm so glad that you have had a chance to know me. Thank you so
Happy anniversary, Donna.
Yeah. Everybody says happy anniversary, and they envy you. I don't know what it is. They. I'm sorry, Donna. Anyway, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have to remember this year.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I know it. You know what, guys, and everybody listen. Donna and I have both been guilty of forgetting our anniversary more than once. We've looked at each other before and said, "Wait a minute, what is the date today?" Well, 2 days ago we were married 17 years. Mm-hmm. we both just have forgotten, and that's not a reflection on our affection for each other. It's just maybe a reflection on how busy we are, and we live in two different places. Donna takes care of her mother at her mother's house, and that's one of the things that I cherish about Donna is her ability to be a caregiver for her mother. She has been a caregiver for me more than once. Once whenever I broke my femur and I couldn't do anything for myself for a while, and then once whenever I had open heart surgery, she was the best caregiver to me. And I see, Donna, I see that characteristic in you whenever you're caring for your mother, and just want you to know that doesn't go unnoticed, and it just makes me love you even more.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sweetie. Okay, I know you're embarrassed, but thank you for letting us talk to you today.
No problem. And so I thoroughly enjoy your podcast every week. Josh and Chris, kudos to putting up with dustry and
That's right.
shenanigans.
It is a cross that we bear.
It's true. All right, Donna, we appreciate you being one of our many listeners. Many. I use that word very loosely. You know, you, our favorite cousin Cindy, her husband Buddy, and a couple more maybe. But
Do the other cousins listen? Because that would be.
I don't know.
Hey.
I think more than half of our listeners are related to me and
We
Donna.
just lost 4 listeners.
All right, Don. Anything else you wanna say before we go?
No, well, thank you very much, sir, to the whole team, and I enjoy it every week. Look forward to it, and look forward to seeing you again probably this weekend.
Probably this weekend.
We'll celebrate, do something special.
Sounds great, honey. Thank you so much. I love you and adore you.
I adore you too. Thanks for putting me on the call.
All right, you bet.
I love you. See
Love you
soon.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys for indulging me. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. She is a special person, and I've never seen anybody.
It has to be. She's been putting up for you 26 years.
I mean, it's been the 7 best years of her life. Putting up with me for 26 years. But anyway, thank you, Donna, very much. I appreciate you and love you. And to the rest of our listeners, we'll talk to y'all later.